We have breaking news out of the Middle East. After a long wait, since October 1st, after many promises, Israel has attacked Iran. Now this is so much complete breaking news, and it's literally just happening. It's unfolding even now as we're on the air here. So we deep dive wanted to give you as much information as we could right now and to put this stuff into context. But also there's just lots of competing information. A lot of people are saying one thing, some people are saying something different. So it's a kind of a murky situation. So we'll have to be a little bit careful with some of the things we're talking about. But what we can say with absolute certainty is that Israel for sure did take this action. And in fact, in one of the unusual points, usually these things happen and Israel doesn't make any comment or they don't take credit for it. But in this case, even before all the ordinance had completely fallen, is Israeli, not prime minister, sorry, the spokesman, Daniel Hagari, came out and unequivocally took credit.
In response to months of continuous attacks from the regime in Iran against the state of Israel, right now, the Israel Defense Forces is conducting precise strikes on military targets in Iran. The regime in Iran and its proxies in the region have been relentlessly attacking Israel since October 7th on 7 fronts, including direct attacks from Iranian soil. Like every other sovereign country in the world, the state of Israel has the right and the duty to respond. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are fully mobilized. We will do whatever necessary to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel.
Now, of course, this is in response to what the Iranians did to Israel on 1 October, where there was just a little under 200 ballistic missiles that were fired, which, of course, itself was in response to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran during their presidential inauguration. And of course, that itself came after the tit for tat back in April of this year, when Israel destroyed an embassy building in Syria of Iran's. And then that time, we kind of thought we dodged a bullet back then, because Israel's response after that 350 missile and drone barrage was hitting a single air defense site. And it looked like, okay, everybody kind of decided that was going to be it, and we kind of calmed down. But then, of course, then Israel assassinated Ismail Haniyeh, and then that inaugurated the next one. And Iran waited a fair amount of time before they responded on 1 October. And then that itself was also a measured response. They didn't kill anybody. They said they don't want this to escalate into a war. And then the question is going to be, what was Israel do? Well, what we don't know yet is how big this is. So there are some reports that there's a lot of strikes going on inside of Tehran in this within the city. There's been some reports out. There's been some images that are coming out and claiming that there's some strikes here. We have to put a kind of a caveat on this. We can never say for sure exactly what's going on, because sometimes, especially on the internet, video gets popped up and claims it's one thing, turns out it was actually something else. So we can't I guess validate any of these at the moment, but this is being characterized and put out right now as what's happening in Tehran. So we'll keep vetting that for you too. Israeli media is also reporting that Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant, and General Halavi are all in the command center in Tehran, continuing to monitor the situation where they're commanding this operation. Now, I have heard some of the news organizations, I believe it was NBC News, is reporting that this is the opening salvo, and there's going to be several waves. So this could have just been a preparation phase. Perhaps they went after some air defense systems in order to make the subsequent waves that come in more effective. We don't know that for sure. There have also been some credible reports that the United States was actually helping refuel Israeli jets, which we speculated would be necessary for any strike on Iran from Israel because of the significant distance involved. But we don't know the numbers, so we don't know for sure what was going on with that. And that even we have to caveat as a report. We don't have anything official from the United States that they actually did that. But there has been a number of different reports saying that there were U.S. aircraft refueling Israeli jets over Jordan in some of the places. Now, the question is going to be what actually was hit. Some reports say that some of the buildings were hit were IRGC barracks. Now, that could be a big problem if it is, because that implies that there could be casualties, as this is in the middle of the night. So there would likely have been troops asleep inside of that building if that was the case. Other reports are saying, well, it looks like Israel actually wanted to de-escalate the situation and again not spark a big war right now by saying that they're hitting targets that also don't have any personnel inside them. But look, we have to look back at some of the language that's been used by the leaders leading up to this, and there is some evidence that Israel doesn't want to de-escalate, that they don't want this to be small. Remember back in September when Benjamin Netanyahu went to the United Nations General Assembly, he was pretty emphatic about what he thought of Iran.
Iran now seeks to weaponize its nuclear program for the sake of the peace and security of all your countries. For the sake of the peace and security of the entire world, we must not let that happen. And I assure you, Israel will do everything in its power to make sure it doesn't happen.
So, of course, that led a lot of people to believe, and we've shown on this network here where Naftali Bennett, former prime minister, emphatically said, we need to go after the head of the octopus. All these tentacles, all these 7 fronts that we're fighting, all go back to the one head in Tehran. And we have to take that out. And he vigorously said we should go after the nuclear sides. We should go after energy sides. We should go after IRGC, all of that kind of thing. So we know that there's lots of advocates both within and outside of the Israeli government for there to be those. And when we saw Netanyahu himself raising the specter of the nuclear program and how emphatic he was about saying we're not going to let it stand and we'll take whatever action we have to keep that from happening, then of course there was some concern that that's what this strike was going to be about. And then that may have been why, in that leaked information, that leaked classified document of the United States that we talked about earlier this week, was that Israel had done a lot of preparation and a lot of rehearsals using lots of aircraft, making it look like there was going to be some big strike. So as we continue to piece this together, and even as I'm talking here and the sources that I've been looking at, Gary's also scouring the internet. If we get any more additional information on what was struck, we'll bring that to you right away. I also want to go to something that Benjamin Netanyahu said on October 1st, right after this strike happened, this 180, 190, whatever it was, ballistic missile strike from Iran on October 1st. He was pretty emphatic then, too, that something big was coming.
Tonight, Iran again attacked Israel with hundreds of missiles. This attack failed. Iran made a big mistake tonight, and it will pay for it. The regime in Iran does not understand our determination to defend ourselves and our determination to retaliate against our enemies.
And so that has finally come to pass tonight. And you saw Hagari's comment there, and he kind of implied and left open the possibility that it was a process, not just that it was that what we had seen so far is all that there was. So that's one of the reasons why we're continuing to watch to see if that was just the preparation phase and if there are additional strikes to come. And certainly Iran is now fully awake and ready for anything that could come beyond that. One of the reasons why I'm wondering if this really over is because of something Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, said about 9 days after Netanyahu's comment there I just showed you, where he said this.
You saw the strikes that Iran launched against us a short time ago. Those strikes were aggressive, but they failed because they weren't accurate. Just as we have been doing until now in the war on all other fronts, whoever attacks us will be hurt and will pay a price. Our attack will be deadly, precise, and above all, surprising. They will not understand what happened or how it happened. They will see the results.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm a little reluctant to accept the prospect that this was just another pinprick attack by Israel, that it was just kind of just wave the flag and say, okay, we did our part, we're not going to escalate further. Because certainly the Israeli population themselves with all of that brash talk, whether it's the United Nations, whether it was by Netanyahu after the 1 October attack or Yoav Gallant prior to that, and even actually just a few days ago, he was again talking about how big and important and painful that this was going to be to Iran. And if it turns out it just hit a few buildings and didn't kill anybody, while that, I would certainly argue that's a good thing because we don't want to escalate this into an all-out war, it'll be hard for them to actually sell this to a population that what they claimed and the heavy language they used was backed up by actions. And there's one thing we've seen from Israel throughout the course of this war, going all the way back to 10/7 of last year, is that they rarely go small and they rarely say something big and then produce something little. So I'm still kind of like waiting to see if the other shoe is going to drop. And so for the moment, let's consider what some of the ramifications can be, because that's one of the things we always want to do here is, and then what? So what do we think is going to happen? After the genuinely small Israeli response after the April attack earlier this year, that did succeed in saying, okay, we did the tit for tat thing. We didn't hit anything big. It was just a missile battery. Apparently nobody got killed. And all right, for a while anyway, that calmed the waters. But the question is, if Israel doesn't do that this time, if they continue on hitting something bigger, or even if what they've done already was small relative to what they wanted to do, but did kill some troops, then the question is going to be now back to Tehran. What are you going to do about it? Because Tehran has also shown that it also doesn't take kindly to being hit by anything, assassinations or whatever, and they eventually respond. And, you know, the whole tit for tat up the escalation ladder. So the question is going to be, is either one of these sides going to finally say, that's fine, that's it, our patience has been exhausted, and then the next response actually hits something big or kills a lot of people? In the days leading up to this, the leaders of Iran, as recently as yesterday, again reiterated that if there is a lethal strike from Israel, that there would be a counter strike of much larger. I think one of the headlines we saw earlier this afternoon was up to 1,000 missiles could come from Iran the next time. And listen, I have to wonder if Israel is trying to play this game and saying, okay, look, we're gonna hit just big enough to say, okay, we wanted to de-escalate and we didn't want to do a lot, and so we have this one relatively small strike in against Iran, and we're ready. We're going to say, okay, we're good to go, and then with the hopes of spawning something like 1,000 missiles to strike or something big coming back from Iran, because then they can say, all right, all the ties are off, and now then they would like to get the United States to come in and participate with them. And by the way, I've been checking so far, and all the comments that I've seen coming out of the Department of Defense and out of the White House thus far are saying that the United States did not participate in this. Now, it remains to be seen about that report about the air refueling. We'll see if that did or didn't happen. But the claims coming out of the Pentagon is that we did not participate in this. In fact, they claim we only knew about it a few hours before it began. And as you saw in that headline there, the president has been aware of it, has been made aware of it. But we already knew that too, because he said on the tarmac a week ago on Friday that he knew what was coming and he knew when it was coming. So unless that was turned out to be wrong, apparently he knew about this before it was going to come. And I'm tending to think that it could be, there's actually a decent chance that we are on the lower end of this. And if there was no casualties on the Iranian side, if there wasn't anything, really big hit, that they will have a chance to just say, okay, that's going to be it. Or maybe they'll have some other kind of symbolic thing that doesn't result in a big strike back here. And then maybe we've dodged a bullet. But listen, we got to look at this and be honest. That's dodged a bullet for now, no matter what may or may not happen in the next phase here. Even if it was the case to where, let's assume that behind the scenes, the United States, the administration especially, was doing everything it could to prevent any kind of a response, to try and say, don't hit back Iran, especially before November 5th, because you can imagine that the last thing that the administration would want is any kind of possibility of getting drawn into a war right before the presidential election. So I can certainly see them using diplomatic means behind the scenes to try to really compel Israel to not go big here. But that may or may not get you past November 5th. But then what does this do to the war going forward? Well, look, you still have the war against the Houthis going in Yemen and everything all up in the Red Sea area. You still have your fighting against Hamas or whoever is rising up out of the ashes of all the destruction that's been going on there. You still have the fighting, and apparently there was also some reports which we have yet to corroborate, but are floating around in some of the information channels that there were also Israeli strikes on targets in Iraq and in Syria as part of this. So it could have been a comprehensive strike. But those things aren't going away either. And of course, the fighting has in Lebanon against Hezbollah is continuing to rage. And I saw a report about an hour before all these missiles started just this evening on the Israeli media that they've had 12 additional soldiers killed in the last 48 hours and some number of additional ones wounded as this fighting continues to really strike a casualty count on the Israeli Defense Forces. And I've given you all the reasons why, because it is much, much more difficult for an offensive force to go out and try and unseat a dug in and prepared enemy defensive positions, especially one that knows the ground intimately. And I think you're just going to continue to see that. Israel is still overextended. They still have set themselves more military tasks than they have military resources and manpower and ammunition, rockets, artillery, missile defenses. I mean, all of those categories. They don't have enough to bring all of these to conclusion. I realize that a lot of them, they want to go into southern Lebanon. Maybe they even want to get rid of all the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank and push all the Hezbollah forces back up to the Litani River, possibly even north of that. Those are all wishful thinking because that's something that is going to require a lot more force than Israel has. I mean, again, it bears repeating. The Saudi Arabia, with all of their resources and all of the help that the U.S. gave them for a full decade to try and destroy the Houthis in Yemen, utterly failed. They never succeeded. And they spent enormous amounts of resources, lost a number of troops in the process, and basically just kind of had to say, all right, we're just going to quit fighting for all intents and purposes. And that kind of went on the back burner. Now then we see that everything the U.S. has been doing for many, many months now against the Houthis, the Israelis have also been hitting them with their own stuff, and yet it hasn't knocked them out. So how is Israel going to deal with that? And all of these militias in the Iraq and in Syria and possibly even in some in Jordan, how are they going to deal with those? The biggest one, of course, is now Lebanon, because they have committed a full-on invasion. There were, last I saw, 4 full combat divisions and possibly more on the way in that's fighting this. And you're talking many, many months. And even then, who knows if they can survive long enough, whether they can continue to keep their economy going during all this time. And all of this is without anything with Iran. If they now expand that in there, and now then we're on the potential to do it, because the sun, I don't think, is even up into Iran yet. So no one knows the results of any of these strikes. Even if it was on the small side, it still could be enough to keep the escalation ladder going up. And perhaps Iran replies, and again, with something a little bit higher, but not a whole lot higher. So we may not be out of the woods at this point, even on this particular front. So the bigger point here is for Israel is whatever happens here, because it's almost certain that Iran is going to do something. It would be out of their character to literally do nothing and say, all right, we're done now. You only blew up a little bit of stuff in our capital city, and you only hit some of our military targets, and that's okay. I just can't see that happening. So I think the probability is that that's going to stay on the tension, and there's going to probably be some kind of, again, even if it's slight escalation, and the concerns are going to remain in there. It really, the wise course of action for the United States and for Israel is to try to bring these conflicts to an end. Look, they have to come to the point to where they say, I get it. These are all, like I mentioned a second ago, all these objectives they want. Those are aspirations that they would like to have. But just imagine, no matter how passionately you want those objectives, you have to look and count the cost. You have to say, what are all my resources? What is the cost in terms of resources and personnel to accomplish these objectives? And if you have a delta, if you have a gap between there and you just don't have enough, then it doesn't matter how much you want them. You have to do what makes sense and not get yourself overextended and continue down a course of action that can't succeed. because they could get into a situation to where their economy buckles under the strain, and then they have serious, serious problems inside the Israeli state. And then they have a lot of potential political chaos, et cetera. I mean, the United States certainly has some experience in this with the Vietnam War, and a lot of unhappiness among the people, the protests and stuff. And there's all kinds of protests going on in Israel, and has been for quite some time. And if those things pick up to where they become not just a nuisance, but a real political movement that could upend the government, then you see you're getting yourself into a position to where you may not be able to ride it out. So that is kind of what that's what the Netanyahu government should be taking consider of. Again, forget about what they think about anybody. Sometimes it really does come down to the bill. Do you have the resources to pay the bill? Because if you don't, man, it could go really bad for you. And from the American perspective, we need to look at our perspective, because at least theoretically, it would be great if the government of the United States actually was interested in preserving our national security interest and our economic interest, et cetera, and prioritizing that. That would be cool. I mean, it's theoretically possible. I haven't seen it in a long time. But what we should do in this situation is say, hey, our inventories of interceptor missiles, of artillery shells, of long-range missiles, et cetera, many categories of things that are really important for warfighting are dangerously low in our inventories. We're not able to create enough of those to meet the needs for Ukraine, for Israel, for Taiwan, and for our own needs in the Middle East, and things that we're doing against the Houthis, for example. And we're expending a great deal of ordnance there. We simply don't have it, and we can't create enough of it. So it would be foolish to ignore all those realities and just keep letting Israel call the shots and go down a path that may be bad for it, but would be bad for us. We have got to get to the point to where we say, hey, before this, if this gives us an opportunity and it hasn't blown up yet, and when the sun comes up, there's not, there's a modest amount of damage that can give the Iranian people an opportunity to not escalate here, then we should take advantage of that opportunity and say, all right, now then it's time to back the hell off, because you can't succeed. And by the way, we're not going to fund something that we know is not going to succeed. We've done that too many times already. And especially even if Biden wants to say, all right, we'll wait to deliver that message for another week and a half or so after November 5th, then so be it. But on November 6th, that message needs to be going across, and that action needs to be taken before we get into something that we may not be able to handle. Well, listen, that's all we have for right now. We haven't seen any additional breaking news. We're going to continue to follow this, though. Every time, there's something to report here, we're going to make sure that you stay on top of it. And like we did even in this episode here, give you the context so you understand what's at stake and what's going on. And as we're arguing, what needs to happen next. But thanks for joining us tonight for this special edition of Daniel Davis Deep Dive. And we will see you tomorrow with whatever updates come when the sun comes up. See you then.